Welcome to the TD K-12 podcast. I'm here to help you navigate the exciting world of living overseas, being an expat, international teaching, and more. I was an expat living and working overseas from 2002 until 2019. After relocating, I decided I wanted to share information I had for those people who might be looking to go overseas and those people who are already overseas and looking to make a move. So join me for this podcast, and if you want to watch on YouTube, the podcast is on YouTube with some visuals. There are links both in the podcast show notes and on YouTube. Please subscribe and hit the like button if you like this. Let's get started. Welcome back to the TD K-12 podcast. This is episode 10, Tie Up Loose Ends or Suffer. This podcast is for after you sign that contract and you're ready to make the move. It doesn't matter if you're already overseas in your home country, these all apply all the time. I can tell you that if you have listened to the other podcasts and you're like, okay, maybe he has a good idea, maybe he doesn't, I can get that because a lot of it is opinion. Everything on here is pretty much based off a mistake I have made or someone close to me has made. Not someone who I don't really know who's just complaining, but someone who I've helped through a problem. I sat down with my wife and my friends and we narrowed it down, and I initially only had 7 or 8 areas, and they were like, oh, but what about this? And don't you remember when this person did that? So we got it down to these 13. So I'm going to go through them. I'm not really going to go through any one of them in great detail. If you need a solution for one of these and you cannot find it, feel free to email me. All right, most important thing to remember, this starts the day you sign your contract. You have to start it immediately. I don't mean 2 days later. I don't mean after you've celebrated. I mean you need to have a checklist ready and you need to start the process immediately. It is important that you know where you're going first because a lot of these plans change based on where you're going. Let's start with some obvious ones, the big ones. If you own property or you have a mortgage, obviously, you're going to keep paying for that and you're going to have to pay your taxes and your mortgage. What you need to make sure you can do, and I mentioned this before in an earlier podcast, you need to be able to cover, I would say safely, 3 months of expenses before you need to send money home. That will guarantee you will have no issues. You don't want to have bad credit or defaults of any kind while you're outside of your country. So if you own mortgages or property anywhere, make sure you have enough money to cover 3 months of payments. If you can't get up to 3 months, get as close to you as you can. And the day you hit the ground in your new country, you need to calmly, very calmly work on getting your bank account set up, getting some money in your bank account, and learning how the transfer works. So this is kind of interesting. Let's say that you get into the country and the way the visa works, you can open a bank account immediately, but you're not going to get any money from your school for 2 or 3 weeks. You should have some cash with you. Take a little bit, convert it, whatever you need to do, deposit it, learn how everything works. Yeah, you're going to lose on fees, but this is training, you're learning, you're saving time in the future, you're saving potential fees and fines if you can't get this done on time. Get all that sorted, make sure you know how everything works. Set up your transfer process. A lot of banks overseas have a formal process you need to go through once so you can do transfers. Learn it all. Get ready, get organized. If you're somewhere like China and you need to learn how to transfer money, email me. I have a guide for that. Unfortunately, it's a huge hassle. Rental agreements. You are taking a job overseas. You get your job in January. Your lease, wherever you're at in the world, is through August, and you need to leave in June. Um, don't show up to your rental agent in June and tell them you want to leave, and they can just keep the deposit. This is a bad plan. Not only can it affect your credit, but they can push back on this. You have a rental agreement, you're supposed to meet the agreement. This is what you should do immediately. First, once you get your contract and you know when you need to leave and you have all the details, as soon as possible, you have that meeting. Hey, I've got a new job opportunity. You need to put it like that, not I need to break my lease. I have a new job opportunity. It's really good for me and my family. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave a little bit early. What are my options? Put it in their court, let them walk you through it. If for some reason breaking the lease is going to really hurt you, ask them if you can sublet or ask them if you can have penalties reduced if you find someone to rent the apartment. Phones and other monthly obligations, get rid of those. You do not need an overseas phone in another country. If you're worried and you want to have a phone number, this is what you do. I don't think it's a bad idea to have a phone number, but you don't need a monthly bill. That's ridiculous. What you need to do is get your phone number on a pay-as-you-go plan. So for example, if you're an American, both AT&T and T-Mobile have pay-as-you-go plans. I've always used T-Mobile. You simply switch your number to T-Mobile, which you can do now. I've never, in the last 5 or 6 years, never seen any issues with that. Switch your number over, get on a month-to-month plan as soon as possible. If you can break your phone plan immediately, it's great. If you got to wait a little bit to save a little bit of money, that's fine. But make sure that your deadline for breaking that phone plan is 60 days before you leave, minimum. So at the 60-day point, make sure you're on a prepaid plan. And that means when you're overseas, your number still works. And every year when you come home, you can top it up and use it. And it's great. And if you need to use your phone overseas to take a phone call, you can top it up, pop your SIM card in or turn your phone on, use your phone. Yeah, you're going to lose a little bit of money, but you're probably taking this phone call for some kind of really important reason, so it's worth it. But you don't have a monthly payment. It's only when you need it. You're paying as you use it. I'm not advocating changing phone numbers. If you need to do that, you need to do it immediately and give yourself up to 6 months to get your phone number changed for everybody who needs it, especially credit card companies, etc. Any other obligations you need to get rid of. So if you have a car that you're making payments on, these are monthly payments, monthly obligations, sell that car. Sell it, pay it off. If you have to take a loss, it's fine. You'll use your salary from overseas to kind of reimburse yourself. Get rid of monthly obligations. If you own a car and you want to use it in the summer, this really depends on your situation. I know people who do this. If you have a safe place to keep it and someone you can trust to come and start it once every like 2 months, that's great. If you just put a car in a storage unit and you have to take all the gasoline out and you're just going to let it sit, when you come back in the summer, you might need a couple of days to get it up and running. You're going to have to keep insurance on it. So if this is something you want to do, that's fine. But if you decide to keep insurance on something, you need to also try to get that down to a 6 month or 12-month schedule. You don't want to pay monthly when you're living overseas. You will travel and you will miss a payment. Something will happen. You'll send money home. Something will happen. The money won't go. I've seen this too many times. You want to keep your monthly expenses as low as possible, and I would say close to zero at all times. You may have credit card debt you have to pay off. We'll get into that in a minute. Don't place that into monthly obligations. Monthly obligations are contracts that you're in that you have to pay monthly. Student loans, this is a big one. You may be going overseas to pay your student loans. Good idea, very smart, but you need to take a few steps. The first thing that you need to do is call whomever you're paying your student loans to, tell them that you're going overseas, and tell them that all communication needs to be via email or it needs to be in writing to an address in the other country. You should already have this address. So let me back up. After you get your contract and you know when you're starting, make certain that the school gives you your mailing address to where you're moving to. You need your mailing address. It's really important. Um, and you can use the school's phone number and update that later, but you need the mailing address. It's going to be important for you to switch a few things over to your new mailing address, even though By the time you get them, things will be out of date. In general, you need to know your mailing address as soon as possible. Plus, you're going to need it for shipping. So you want to call your student loan servicer and say, hey, I'm leaving the country to work. I need to make sure that all of the communication is via letter and email. Now, if they push back and they don't want to do this, which they probably won't, you need to understand your consumer rights. So it's very clear, it's pretty easy. I've done this before. You can send them a letter. There are samples on this website. I'll put this in the show notes. Once they receive this letter, you can mail it and or fax it. I think you should do both. You need to print it, sign it, mail it, print it, sign it, fax it. And if they have email, scan it and email it. All three. The second they receive this, they have to follow it. They can't ignore it. It's the law, especially if you're in the US. In other countries, this might be different, but I'm sure they have a similar process. So what you want to do is you want to take control of the communication. Because if there's a problem and they're calling you, they'll never get a hold of you and they'll just say that you're ignoring their phone calls. That's why you need to do this. The second thing you need to do is talk to them about loan frequency payments. If you can, pause your payment. Pause. I'm not saying go into forbearance. I'm not saying do anything to hurt your credit. If you can pause your payments for the first 8 to 12 weeks after you move, then what's going to happen is you can start making payments before you're required to, and there's no way you're going to miss a payment. So again, you're giving yourself an 8 to 12 week buffer to get your money sorted in the other country, to get your bank set up, and to start figuring out how to pay bills. Now, I've mentioned before that banking is important and choosing a bank is important. I'll get into that in a minute, but don't just assume that because you can pay your bills right now that you can pay them in the same manner when you're overseas. So take control of that process. Mail. You're going to need to be able to get mail. Mail's going to come to you that you can't control. You need to find a friend or family member and make that your mailing address, and it really needs to be in the state where you have a driver's license. So it's that simple. You need a place for mail to go. If you can't, and this is if you're a US citizen or a Canadian citizen, I don't know necessarily about other countries, but in general, it's good to have an official ID aside from your passport connected to an address in your home country. So I'll say that again. An official ID aside from your passport connected to an address in your home country. It's a very good idea to have that. You need a place for your mail to go. It's you want to update all of your accounts and everything with wherever the mail is going to go. Now, you're thinking, oh, wait, I have an investment account. Why don't I just have the paperwork sent overseas? I have a credit card. Why don't I just have the paperwork sent overseas? You don't want to do that for a lot of reasons. First off, any financial company can choose not to allow you to have your account once you move overseas. It's not illegal for you to do it, but they can choose for you not to be a customer anymore. So you definitely want to avoid that. Secondly, you can get mail that you're not planning on, and they won't have your overseas address. But if you have mail on file with your driver's license and through other vendors, they will be able to get mail to you. So just keep that in mind. Credit cards. All right. Credit cards are a little sticky, and this is why. If you watch a lot of financial planners, they'll tell you to get rid of your credit cards. That's because people are really, really bad at managing credit cards. When you are living overseas and you need to travel and do stuff, or if you're in an emergency, you really need a credit card, and you need a good one. If you have really bad credit, it is hard to get a good credit card. I have done credit card applications that are 5 or 6 pages long and take a week or more to approve because I wanted a special credit card that had special travel and flight benefits and a bunch of other stuff with it. And I'm telling you right now that you need a credit card if you live overseas. I would say that you need 2, and they need to be the right kinds of credit cards. So this is going to go into number 7, banking. Here is my advice. 1, get credit cards connected to your bank account. Don't just have a random Lowe's credit card or Walmart credit card. You don't need that. If you have anything like that, credit cards like that, that have no travel benefits, real travel benefits are connected to airlines, like an American Express Delta credit card or a MasterCard American Airlines credit card. If you don't have something like that, it's not going to do you any good. So pay those off and get rid of them. If you can't pay them off immediately, put them on the back burner and pay them off. Do not use them anymore. They're just going to be a hassle, they're going to be expensive, and they're not going to be worth it. For example, if you get a MasterCard that's connected to American Airlines and you get the right kind, you can use it while you travel. You don't get any fees for foreign transactions. That's huge. It's huge. I get statements that tell me how much I saved in fees when I travel. It can be $200 or $300 a month sometimes, just in fees I've saved. I never use my credit cards to take cash out. I just use them as credit cards. You're thinking, oh, what about debit cards? No, no, no. Debit cards and credit cards are not the same, especially overseas. You really do not want to use a debit card outside of your home country. You're taking a big risk because that is a direct transaction in cash from your checking account or your savings account. And if there's a problem or scam, and there are more than you realize, you may never get that money back. And I'll tell you what, it's pretty hard to close those cards out and get new cards when you're overseas. So you definitely want to keep your debit cards in the back burner. They do not count as credit cards. So you want to you want to try to pay off any credit cards that are just like normal consumer credit cards for your home country. If you can't pay them off, stop using them, put them on the back burner. You need to find a bank that is a national bank that has um, branches in lots and lots of places, because when you transfer back into your home country from overseas, you may come in different points. Like you may come into Dallas, you may come into California, you may come into New York. If you ever have to do any serious banking or fix something immediately, you need to be working with a bank that has locations all over your country. So, for example, BMO is a good bank for Canadians. TD Bank is a good bank for Canadians and Americans. I've been very happy with US Bank. They're everywhere I need them to be, and their banking services are great. Um, I do not have one of those bank accounts where it's all online and I don't meet a person. You know, some banks offer you these great deals as long as you kind of promise never to go in. If you ever have to go into a bank because you're an expat, you're gonna need to be able to go into the bank for a serious reason. You don't want to have one of these accounts where it's like, oh, I thought you said you could do everything online without ever talking to a human being. That is a huge mistake. If you ever have a banking problem, it'll be a huge hassle, so you need to make sure that you have a little bit of status within their banking structure. When you find a bank that is a national bank, um, they're going to have different kinds of offers. What you want is you want a credit card connected to your bank account so that you can go into your bank account online and pay off your credit card. You don't want to have to do it through any kind of third party, and you don't want that credit card payment going to another party for payment. So, for example, your bank might have Visa cards issued by somebody else. You don't want that. You want it, if you have US Bank, like my US Bank credit card says US Bank on it. I log into my banking, I see my credit card balance, I pay it off. Every time I use my US Bank credit card overseas, every single time I get an email, and that email tells me that the card was used. Those are the types of services you need when you're traveling and you're outside of your country. You need up to the minute reporting to make sure you don't get into some kind of financial scam. I have a friend who lost like $11,000 traveling in Spain because her credit card was scanned and stolen. And by the time she got back, her account was drained. So it was a debit card, actually, not even a credit card. It was a Visa debit card. Her account was drained. And she didn't know about it because she didn't have any kind of flagging put up on it and she wasn't using it that much. So when she tried to use it again and it had no money in it, she was like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, you used all this money in Spain." And she's like, "No, I didn't." There was literally no way for her to prove one way or the other it wasn't her. So all of this is very, very important. I know people who like to travel without credit cards because they're afraid of credit card debt. I totally understand that. My credit cards were never used for anything when I was, like, for example, living in China, except when I was buying airline tickets. So I break out the credit card to buy the airline tickets. I'm getting reimbursed from my school. I'm getting the air miles. I'm also um, using the credit card every time for very large purchases instead of small purchases. And then I'm paying it off immediately. Like I'm buying airline tickets, and 2 days later, I'm paying it off. My credit score following this process skyrocketed, like to the top. I didn't have to worry about anything. Whenever I went back to the US, I had really good credit. If you're living somewhere with a credit score, this will help you. You use the credit card, buy big stuff, pay it off immediately. You're basically just using the credit card for the benefits and convenience, but you're not using it to buy things you can't afford. All right. I am not going to get into investments. They're a lot more complicated. All I can tell you is that you definitely need some kind of retirement plan, and you need to set it up before you leave the country, and you need to make sure that you can move money into it from your bank. So if you're working overseas, you would transfer your money to your bank and then fund your retirement plan through your bank. Don't do it the other way. Just do it that way, and you should be fine. All right, family obligations and elder care. I have met people who are working overseas and sending money home because they're trying to support a family member. And this is very hard for people, and it is a very common scenario. The family obligation can't really extend past money. So if you're financing the family member or you're helping pay for medical care, great. If you have to make regular trips back to help them, it's not going to be possible. You're going to lose your job. It's that simple. You can't care for a family member when you're really far away. It's just too hard to do it. Um, if you're going to go somewhere and a family member really needs to come stay with you on a regular basis, you need to make sure that they're allowed to and that that is legal. A lot of people believe that people can just come and visit as much as they want. Countries do not always allow that. So this is difficult. You should have looked into this before you applied for a job. So if you applied for a job somewhere and um, let's say that you're married and you have two passports, and because of that, it's really easy for you to work somewhere like China or wherever. It doesn't matter. But your family, like maybe your mother and your father, they have a passport and it's from a country that's not as popular or easy for people to travel from. They might not be able to come visit you, and you were hoping to take care of them 6 months out of the year. Or they can come visit you, but they can only stay 30 days and then they have to leave the country for 90 days. You need to look into all of this. Don't just count on it. Make sure you understand that. Phone numbers and contact information. This goes back to phones and other monthly obligations. You need a phone number for your home country, and you need to make sure that that phone number and the contact information you're using, which should be connected to a mailing address, which should be connected to a driver's license or some form of ID. You need to make sure that all that information is circulated and updated, and you need to confirm it before you leave. So let's say you contact a credit card company and you update everything. You want to go online and a week later make sure it's updated. Don't just put it in and hope. I have submitted information, for example, to medical insurance, and 2 months later it reverts back. You just have to keep an eye on this stuff. Make sure it's updated. Cars owned and financed. This goes back to monthly obligations. You own a car, you want to keep it. Make sure you have a safe place to put it and you have somebody who can check on it. And then look at your liability. If you're not driving it, what kind of insurance you need to have on it just to have it parked. That's going to vary state by state. You don't want to finance vehicle overseas. Sell it, get rid of it. Don't keep paying a car payment. You could be moving somewhere where you need a vehicle. You don't want to maintain multiple vehicles. It's not a good idea. And as far as I know, if you have a finance vehicle, you're going to have to carry some kind of insurance on it. So it's just extra cost. And your car is just kind of rotting away. Shipping plan. Start the research, get options, and begin paring down. I can do an entire episode on shipping and all of your stuff. I might. Here's the general advice: you need to pare down. You need to get rid of everything that you can get rid of. If you can't travel overseas without a certain frying pan, you probably should not go overseas. You can buy stuff in other countries, you can get stuff. Some places will tell you, like if you're going to Africa, that they're going to give you a big shipping allowance to bring everything you need because it's hard to buy things. You need to ask them if they're going to give you a shipping allowance to bring it back. If they're not, you don't want to take that much stuff because guess what? It's really expensive to ship it back. So you need to have a shipping plan that makes sense, but before you even start that, you need to pare down. Um, if you haven't seen Tidying Up with Marie Kondo or read it, I highly recommend it. It should motivate you and help you get this done. I can tell you that by most standards, my wife and I are minimalists, and we've pared down 3 times, and we got to a point where we just really didn't need that much. We preferred to be able to move easily, to travel, and not to just be surrounded by stuff. I know some people who have moved with so much stuff that they were miserable because they were clearly communicated to that the place they were moving to had no storage. So remember, if your school's giving you an apartment or a home, that's it. You don't get to show up and ask for like a storage building. And if they show you how big it is and tell you how big it is, and you look at all your stuff and say, oh, my stuff's not going to fit, you've got to make your stuff fit. So you just need to bring less of it. Here's kind of a really good concept. Your shipping allowance should cover whatever it covers. So take your shipping allowance, then consider the only thing you're going to do is put stuff on the plane. Meaning, let's say let's say you pack everything and it's 12 huge duffel bags. Your shipping allowance covers 4 of those. You're going to pay for the other 8. It goes on the plane. Can you afford that? If you can't afford that, you take it. You take 12 huge duffel bags. If you can only afford 4 additional or 8 total duffel bags, then maybe that's all you should take. And then you get it right when you get off the plane and you're done. No customs, no other shipping, etc. If you're not required to bring furniture or electronics or wherever you're going, don't take them. Remember, if you're going into an expat community, there are expats who are moving all the time and they're selling stuff all the time. And it is usually dirt cheap. So people in general bring too much stuff and they can't afford to leave with it. This is the truth. The first move, people bring too much stuff and they can't afford to bring with it, to leave with it. So they end up bringing a ton of stuff. It clogs up their living. They hate it. They're cramped. They're unhappy the entire time. They get ready to leave. They find out it's like 4 times the money to take it back than it was to bring it. And most of the stuff isn't worth it. You're not going to spend eight or $10,000 moving $2,000 worth of stuff. And that's what happens. So there's a lot of options for you. If you show up light without a lot of stuff, you can buy stuff from people. If you decide to use a shipping company, they're going to need months and months of notice, and they're going to pick up your stuff maybe 2 to 3 months before you go. So think about this. Let's say that there's 3 or 4 boxes, and you're like, I can't live without it. Well, you're going to have to live without it for 2 or 3 months in order to use it when you get to your next location. So if you can live without it for 2 or 3 months, you're probably going to be able to live without it. So my message, one more time, pare down, don't take a lot of stuff. Just pay for whatever you can afford to put on the plane, pick it up when you get there, and just move on and be resourceful once you land. All right, number 13 and final, medical conditions and medications. Let's say you have some kind of medical condition or something that you haven't disclosed to your school or that potentially could impact you the first month or 2 that you're there and you're not sure how you're going to deal with it. Like maybe you have a torn meniscus and you can get around, but you really need to take care of it. And maybe you want to do that on your new insurance. I don't know. I have seen this um, a few different times. I've seen people show up with like actually serious issues in their back, their knees, or their spine or something, like serious issues. And what they're basically doing is they're going to come to the new job, they're going to work like 6 to 8 months, go to the hospital, go to the doctor, and then, oh, you need surgery. I don't know if that's your situation. I don't know if you just need medication, But you need a plan, and you need to have that plan and not put that on your school the second you show up. Um, they're going to kind of expect you to show up and be able to work, not show up and go to the hospital. You can get special insurance through people like Cigna, and it's basically for expats. You can pay for like a 3, 4, 6, 12-month plan. And it is very good insurance. It's not that cheap, but it's not that expensive. And you can get it for only outside of your home country. So, like if you're a US citizen, you get it for every place but the US. And then it becomes, surprisingly more affordable. And let's say you just got it for 3 months and you get there, you use it initially until everything is organized and you know how your new insurance works. And maybe a strategy would be, okay, I really have some like minor knee surgery. Recovery time is like 3 days. It's very expensive to do in my home country. Get a Cigna package, for example, for like 4 to 12 weeks. Ask if you can arrive a little bit early to start the job, like a month early. Tell them that you want to get settled, show up, take care of yourself. You're paying for it, it's on your own time, and you're starting work and you're healthier and happier. If you have medication that you need, but maybe that medication isn't easy to get in the country you're going to, you're going to have to speak to your local doctor, get as much as you're allowed to get. And then once you land, again, see how you can get that medication. Don't move somewhere where medication you might be on isn't available or is illegal. There's not a lot of solutions for that. You absolutely do not want to have medication mailed to you. In most countries, that's illegal. It will be intercepted. You will be arrested. So don't count on people mailing you medication. That is a really, really bad idea. All right, so there we go. Tie up loose ends or suffer. I think I've covered all the important stuff. Now you have a lot to think about, but this is exciting. This means that you have a contract and you're moving forward, and now you're ready to start planning a new adventure.